Hey guys, it's Forsaken Reality here with the 51st episode of the multiplayer RPG tutorial series. In this one, we're going to be finishing up our magic combat system, so we'll be able to cast a fireball by the end of this one. I just had their fun then spawned in the world. And by the end of this one, we'll be able to walk and just cast the fireballs, and they'll damage your enemies and hit surfaces. They'll also have a drop that you'll be able to adjust yourself. You don't have to have your projectile drop, but that's what we will be setting up. We'll also be setting up the explosion when it hits. So that's what we'll be doing here. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button so you get notified when I upload new videos, and it also helps me and the channel itself. So without further ado, we will get into setting this up. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to just move this project over out of the way. So now we have our project here, and we're going to want some new effects, and the ones we're going to use, I'll leave the link in the description, is the free Infinity Blade effects, which are in the Unreal Engine Marketplace. And we can just open our launcher. Actually, yeah, I should probably pull this into the screen so you can see it. And you want to start, once you download it and add it to the launcher, we can come in here, search Infinity Blade, and you'll get your effects. Add your project. And we will want to search up for our RPG tutorial series. Here, we'll just select your project. This is mine right here. I'm just going to add it to the project. Just going to pause what it does is this, or actually it's finished now for me. So maybe not. Just going to close out of this and close out of this. Oops. And now we have our project open, Infinity Blade effects. And this will give us a lot of different effects, but some of the ones we're going to be using are going to be our Fireball particles, which is the fireball base and the trail. And I think that it's the death right here, which is the explosion. There's lots more that you can look through. So the first thing we're going to do is actually go into our combat component. And we can just delete this light and heavy attack variables right here. We don't need those anymore. Close out of that, save all. And now we're going to want to create our projectile blueprint. So go into our blueprints folder, new folder. It's going to name this projectiles. Right click in here, blueprint, create an actor. It's going to be our master projectile. We'll handle the main code for all of our other projectiles. And in here, first thing we want to do is get our collision. We're going to use a sphere collision. And rename that the projectile collision. I'm going to put this over our scene route, so that's now the new route. And we're also going to want particle system. This one's going to be our projectile particle. And we're going to duplicate this. And this is going to be our projectile trail particle. Because we're gonna have a we're gonna set it up so we can have a trail at the end of our particle if we wanted, and if not, you could just leave it empty in your specific one that you make. We're also going to want our projectile movement component, which is a component that's set up automatically in Unreal Engine. Gives you access to some really useful things. And I'm just going to set my initial speed to 1000. And I'm going to tick should bounce in case I ever want to use it. I'm going to be setting it up so it destroys the projectile. So basically, if you don't destroy, it'll start bouncing around. And I'm just going to double check on the collision. I believe we need to make some updates here. So yeah, we want to have any of our projectiles at any point bounce. We'll do that. We'll select block all. It'll still explode once it hits because we'll be using our on-component hit rather than our overlaps to check if we're hitting things, and it'll explode from there. So, and simulate and generate hit events. We want to tick that in our collision. And I believe that will be it for our master projectile. Double check the movement. And yes, so from here we can just temporarily create our Fireball Projectile. And for our particle, we can search Fireball and get the Fireball base, which is from the new pack that we just added. There's also other ones that you can look through, and you can always look through and see if there's any other spells you want to use. The Fireball Weaker and the Strong. We'll be looking into charge attacks as well, which this actually comes with some particles for charging, which is pretty neat, so we'll be able to make it look a lot nicer while we're doing charge attacks. So for now, we'll set up our trail. And we'll look for the base trail, I believe. That's the one we want. Compile and save. And just test out the projectile, see how it's moving and everything. You can just put it in the world and you can see the projectile is in the world. Is not being deleted yet. So you see it bounces around, the smoke flies through it. And so now we're going to handle the projectile actually hitting things besides bouncing. So basically, Master Projectile. Yeah, and they're in our Master Projectile. We will first just get rid of these. Compile and save. Now we can keep those there in here just in case we ever do end up adding things. It's a good idea to keep them there. And we're going to go to our Projectile Collision, scroll down, and on component hit. We are going to spawn emitter at location. And the location is going to be the location of our current fireball. So get actor location and plug that in. And that'll give her the location of our fireball to hit. You want to drag out from your emitter template and promote that to a variable. That's going to be our hit particle. So when the fireball explodes, this is going to be basically what the explosion is going to be. So spawn the projectile hit particle. And for the hit particle, fireball, we will look for I think it's the Strong Death is the one that I was using. I'll just double check that, and all you need to do is see it in the game. Well, actually, you can just check mine. I mean, it's actually not even, I'm completely wrong. I search up the Flame Explode particle. This one actually looks a lot better when it explodes. And I set in the wrong place. I don't know why I put that there. So make sure your particle trail is the base. Your particle is the fireball. And in here, your hit particle is your explode. I don't know why this always seems to go for me. I always like to find success only, so I just need to click compile. There we go. There's some nice explosions. And from here, we want to call our hit event if it hits our AI, basically. We want to call the hit, which will call damage, and our everything that happens when we hit an AI, basically, because it's calling it through the interface, which sends it through this interface, which will send the hit message within our AI, if I can find them. That'll basically call a message that sends through here every time that this is called. And we can just set promote to a variable. And that'll be our projectile damage. So now you can set your damage per projectile. Just gonna set that to 50 for now. This is going to send a message to the hit event, or NPC, so you know exactly where it's to and what it's doing. And from here, we want to destroy things in a specific way, because if we just put in our destroy actor, compile and save that, then when it hits, it just destroys it, but also instantly destroys the smoke. So if you notice, the smoke stream actually disappears midair instantly. So away we go to fix that. We do want our destroy node to finish destroying whatever's left over to the actor. But we want to get our collision and our particle. And we're going to get destroy component. Plug both of these into there like that. So now we have our destroy component set up. I'm just going to disable that so you can see exactly what's going on. So you see that there's still actually the actor's still alive, and it's still allowing it to send smoke because we haven't destroyed the full actor and we haven't destroyed the trail particle. So you want to put a delay node here. And I'm just going to delay this for 1 second. Give the smoke time to fade out. And I'm just going to search up for destroy component. And I'm also going to destroy the actor after this. So we're going to destroy the collision and projectile particle when hitting something. Delay for smoke to clear. Delay for projectile trail, because we might not have a smoke trail all the time. So I'll be more specific there. Delay for projectile trail. And I'll just destroy whatever's left. So basically everything else, the movement and everything gets removed from that point on. And I just thought of something. We might want to have a different delay. Our trails might be different, so you can promote this to a variable. And we'll have a trail destroy delay, so basically if our trail lasts longer and shorter, then we'll be able to destroy this and instance editable for all three of these because we want to set them per projectile. Go into our Fireball Projectile, damage, we can set to 50. Just double checking that. Trail delay, we can set the 1 for our Fireball. And it should be 0 in here. It's going to set the default 0. For Fireball, it will be 1. So there we go. Everything is being destroyed and running properly there, I believe. That's all we need to do for that. And now that we have our projectile being sent, we can actually test out the damage as well. So you can see that it's actually hitting our AI. And you move it over, this one has less health, so we'll kill him. And you'll notice that everything has been destroyed. There's no more particles or anything in the area. So now we want to start looking into setting up our actually casting the projectile from our spell using the animation we created in our last one. So first off, we're going to go into our blueprints and open up our combat component. And in here, we're going to click spawn, make a function called spawn projectile. And I'm going to show you 2 different ways to spawn your projectile, so you'll be able to cast it from your left hand, but also we have other animations that maybe use your wand cast or a staff cast. You will be able to cast it from the mesh itself. So basically, but we're going to be using our left hand for now. So you just want to drag out of here, spawn actor from class, and we're going to get our Master Projectile. Split this. So for our weapon, for our hand, we're going to get our character reference, get our mesh, get socket location, and I'm going to make a socket in a second called the spell socket. So we want to make a socket on our character. RPG, meshes, skeletal, character, meshes. Or mesh, open up this mannequin, I guess. It could have stayed in there, but I'm just going to open up the skeleton. And hand L. Add socket. And it's going to be our spell socket on our hand L. I'm just going to move it. So that's down here. If you notice that's colliding with your character, you can just either adjust the location, but we'll actually want to just go into our Fireball Projectile. You'll notice the collision is really big there. Go to your Projectile Collision and you can actually just shrink that down to a more smaller size. And that should be good enough for our Fireball. I guess it will be casted somewhere in front of the hand there, so we want to put it in there. It seems good enough for me for now anyway. So in our combat component, we have our spell socket. We want to get socket rotation as well. For our spell socket, plug these in. And that will get the socket location. We also want to always spawn ignore collisions. And if you want to use your weapon, add a socket to that. First, you want to go into the get here, get your holdable mesh, or whatever you named your mesh specifically. And you can use these same socket plugins right here and get the socket names, but in this time we're getting it from our holdable mesh. Now you can either do this for static, both static and skeletal meshes. So on a static mesh, you can simply go in and open the static mesh, create a socket, create your spell socket. You just put it where you want, and that will pick that up properly. And on the skeletal mesh for a weapon, I'll show you on a random weapon. First skeletal mesh I find, you can just add a socket. That's how you'd add it to a skeletal mesh. And you just put it up at the front because that's where you'd be casting it from. And if the rotation was off, you could always just come in here and rotate the socket the way you want until the rotation was correct. But I'm not going to be using those sockets on the weapon for this specific spell at least. I just figured I would show you how to do it. I'm just going to plug this in here. You can always just keep that weapon there just so you get an idea, and then maybe it'll allow you to remember later on down the road. If you wanted to do that, change that up later. So spawn projectile is now finished, our function. And now we want to actually go into our animation. I'm just going to close that. Go to our magic animations, open this up. And we'll want to add notify, new notify. And the notify's name will be cast spell, and you can name that however you want. And then you just got to move to basically where you want when you want the spell to come out, so just after he raises his hand. And then you have your notify set, but you don't have it being called or doing anything. Simply come into here, cast spell. You'll get your notify, but you want to not probably put that in the correct location, so you want to put that in your notify graph. Just type that in and we'll get it because you created it in your animation. And you want to drag out of here. Actually, first we'll get our character reference, combat component. Then we'll get our spawn projectile. And something I didn't do in the last one, but in my test project, but we can do in here. In our combat component, we can actually drag out of this or actually in our weapon, put it in our weapon, so it'll be with our staff. So I will go into my blueprints, items, and for now I will store this variable not in my staff, but in my master holdable. And this will be spell projectile. And we'll get PP master projectile there. And now if we go into our staff, first we want to make this instance editable. Now we go into our staff, compile. We should have access to our spell projectile, which would be one second. And yeah, just quickly just noticed the problem. I noticed that we need a class reference for our master projectile so that it can get the children of our master projectile and make sure that's instance editable. Now we'll have this pin here. Now we can set the spell projectile Fireball. And now in our combat component, we can get our weapon reference, get our spell projectile, and plug that in here. And now we're now setting our spell projectile per weapon. If you don't have one, just none. For now, we have our fireball. Spawn projectiles on our notify. Our notify is playing there. Just gonna test this out now. Okay, it's shooting the fireball, but you'll notice that it's not shooting it straight. It's getting weird rotations. And that's a super simple fix, actually. So that's our cast spell notify. The easy fix would be we're gonna go into our anim graph, go down here to our layered blend propone, and we actually just want to see the mesh space rotation. Take this, and here you can see our layered blend propone is for the spine. And now when we pick up our weapon, we cast, everything is going perfectly straight. And we can cast and cast fireballs. They'll blow up on all surfaces that we want them to. And later on, we'll look into setting up bouncing projectiles and other types of projectiles. Projectiles that explode into multiple kinds of projectiles would be pretty cool. Maybe some freezing projectiles and charging projectiles. All depends on what we get to and what people want to see. I'm just testing this out now with the even when we blend it sideways, we still get our projectile to go straight there. You can notice nothing really interferes with how the projectile goes, so that's perfect. That's going to be everything for this episode. If you found this video helpful and want to see more, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on future uploads. If you have any questions, suggestions, or comments, feel free to leave those in the comment section below, or join my community Discord using the link in the description. Thanks, and I will see you in the next episode.